I think glazed terracotta has a bad reputation, guys. I've been working on a mansion build, and the garden area of the mansion was supposed to have this Greek architecture kind of a style, with bright colors and fake walls, and I've been using glazed terracotta as I usually do, which is as flooring and walls and ceilings. But because I was already using glazed terracotta, I decided why not put it in some areas as artwork. Because of that, I was messing around with them and trying to figure out which new patterns I could create with it. And my love of glazed terracotta expanded tenfold, so I'm here to talk to you guys about the underdog of Minecraft blocks, I'm over here, guys. One of the number one complaints that people have with glazed terracotta is that it's so darn hard to work with because you always have to rotate to place it down. It's like, how do I know which way is the right? I didn't want to go that way, so I have to go this way or this way, or do I have to look up? The number one obstacle that people face when working with glazed terracotta that stops them from liking it entirely is the fact that they don't understand how to place it. There's two ways you can approach this. The first way is kind of just brute forcing it. You face this way, it goes this way. You face this way, it goes this way. Bam, bam. It doesn't matter if you're facing up or facing down. There are 4 rotations to every glazed terracotta block. Number 2 is data packs. I think this is perfectly fine. A lot of people don't like using them because they feel it takes away from the vanilla experience, but it's just carrot on a stick that lets me rotate the block. So I'm going to go through every single glazed terracotta block, the patterns that I found with it, and oh, that's not. Number 1 is white glazed terracotta, and this is where I'm going to introduce to you the concept of 3 separate patterns that always show up in glazed terracotta. There is a primary pattern, a secondary pattern, and the in-betweens, which is the third pattern. Now, the primary pattern of white glazed terracotta is this kind of daisy sun texture. So if you look at this block, here's the daisy part, here's the second part, which kind of looks like a dandelion if we're going to push it, and we have these in-between parts that look like wings. Now you can fiddle around with these blocks to make them look a certain way, and that way is this way. Now, of course, you can do multiple things with white glazed terracotta. We can make them face this way and this way and this way, and we can make stripes with them and stuff. I'm just showing examples of ways you can maneuver with them for them to actually look pretty, and you can find your own ways that you prefer. There are 2 different things here that I like to call the bow tie shape and the hurricane shape. Now, this is the bow tie shape. This fans out like a bow tie on these 2 ends and narrows in like a bow tie on these 2 ends. And this is the hurricane method, where there are lines all going toward the center, rotating inwards like it's a hurricane. So you can see this creates nice borders around the bow ties, which is another thing that pops up a lot in glazed terracotta. And these wings kind of spread outwards in these straight lines. Like I was telling you earlier, you could just rotate these to form like these straight line patterns, which are really nice looking. Now, another gripe people have with glazed terracotta is that this is very clearly mostly blue rather than mostly white, but I don't care because it's pretty. Moving on. Next up is orange glazed terracotta. As we see, we have another problem where this is mostly cyan, but I don't care because look at these flowers. These look like butterfly wings. So we have the primary shape, the secondary shape, and the in-betweens actually don't exist in this one. These look like extra petals when you have them in context of this, but if you divorce it from that, it's just, look at that, it's a butterfly. Then we can make some bow ties that kind of look like moths again. I do really like these different shadings of this. So like this could be like a beetle if you want it to be. It's very bug inspired, but at the same time, this is so clearly flower inspired, and the way they mix the two is just... Next up is the magenta It's... Okay. Are they just arrows? Yeah. Now, some people say that you could use these as arrows to point directions in a map that you're building in survival mode that you can't have access to command blocks for. I say that's dumb because we have this. But I do really like these stripe textures. If the arrow was less obvious or prevalent and didn't take up the entire block, I would be so down for these because they're just so pretty. Like this, it really reminds me of like in real life bamboo mats, and they're adding those into Minecraft 1.20. One idea that I had for these is that they're neon and they have arrows. They can be like directions for like a technological based city. Like if I were to name some problematic pieces of media right now, Blade Runner, Cyberpunk 2077. They'll have this aesthetic for like grungy, dark with like bright neon reds and greens and pinks, but otherwise they're kind of ugly. You can also use it as a modern art piece, but I hate this kind of art. You see, I didn't make this piece of art for me to tell you what it means. It's actually because art is for the viewer. You are meant to interpret its meaning for yourself. No, the arrows are in a circular motion. Circles have been using symbolism for decades, centuries even. If you're gonna call something art and make it circular, people are gonna be like, oh, it's about rebirth. It's about society. Oh, but Super Geek, didn't it just work? You just told me multiple interpretations of the piece. No, I told you multiple interpretations of circles. It's a scam. They're telling you that the piece is for you to interpret, but they're giving you the predetermined like 3 ways to interpret a circle. It's not special. There's so much good modern art out there, and people make this. So there is a use for these. If you're building in a certain palette, which is good, you should have options. Why is that like that? Next up is light blue terracotta, and I really like this because there's hidden details that are like, not really hidden, but you don't really notice them unless you have to point it out to yourself. So number 1, we have the main thing, which is this white little fan thing going on, and we have these squares, but there's a secondary darker wind thing, which is like a turbine or like a fan, maybe just like a flower. I don't know how to describe this shape, but it's a nice shape at the very least. And I really love how the colors mix here with the darker blues and the lighter blues, but you don't really notice this darker wind shape until you turn around and you just, hey, you could rotate it so that these line up with these, and so we have this darker side and the lighter side. If you kind of walk away from it, it kind of gives a 3D effect. The darker blue lines really just add a lot to the shape. Like here you can see it just kind of zigzags through it, or this one, it has the hurricane effect as well, where all the lines feed into the square. At least say hi to the video.
Hello, video.
So I didn't notice this in the video, but if you put the arrows on the outside border of the block, the inside forms a little square. It gives a little floor pattern. So you can see like a cross section through here. So on a grander scale, this could be like a really eccentric ballroom mansion. The ballroom of a mansion. Jesus Christ. Yellow, this is the primary shape. Here's a secondary shape. The in-between right here. It kind of feels like the inside of a beehive, especially with the browns and the yellows creating these striped circles. There's not really a good inverted version of this though. It's just kind of you have this and that's it. Next up we have lime glazed terracotta. Oh my god, this is my favorite glazed terracotta. Number one, these all line up. All the other ones do look far too repetitive if you just put them all in the same configuration. Like, oh wow, that is the same shape over and over again. And sure, there's some interesting design work that could be said for here, but overall not the greatest. But here, this looks fine. But you can also rotate these around in the middle, and then boom, you have these kind of fancier lines. Over here, we can create the circles with the diamond shapes in between. And you can see over here, I have far more going on with. Right over here is the rounder shape where it curves outwards, but then we can flip it around and now it curves inward. So we can mix and match the outward curves and the inward curves to create these shapes, which then you can use to make shapes that kind of look like lily pads, or you can kind of mix them around and make it look like a boot. Over here we have all the jagged inward curves facing outwards so that they have these spiky appearance, but if you have all the outward curves going on, it looks like a rounder appearance and it looks really nice. And you can mix and match these again, where you can just have these borders, and it's just, I love messing around with these. Next up is gray terracotta, and this one really confused me for a while because I couldn't figure out how to work it, because I think this is the intended design, but you really focus on these lighter gray textures. So this might have been the intended design, but you can see these are bow tie textures, which as we know from previous ones, those are always like a secondary pattern that you made by mixing and matching the previous intended pattern. But this also has bow tie textures, so I don't know. Did we skip pink? We'll get back to pink. Gray kind of gives off this fantasy magical energy, which doesn't really make sense because, like, look at this. This kind of gives off like gears with a circle and these little teeth coming out of it. But that's what you call the little spikes on a cog. We also have these like clover kind of shapes. I really don't know how to describe this. It does look really nice. The aesthetic of this is just, there's something there that I can't quite put into words. Over here we have this pattern, which kind of looks like a plus sign, but it's just, they put it at an odd number so that it's split between blocks and it doesn't really center on the block line. It just kind of pushes it one over. And so it looks like this is kind of like opening up and hiding this pattern inside of this. And that's really cool. I like that a lot. Over here we have another bug looking thing going on. There's a lot of bug shapes because like the bow ties look like wings and these look like heads and tails, and there's shapes. Over here, pink. I don't really like pink, I'm gonna be real with you. Yes, the leaves are really nice looking. The fact that it's kind of a flower with the sakura, cherries. Did I just say sakura? I'm so sorry. I took Japanese for 2 years and I can't even say the word. Next up is the pink glazed terracotta, and I don't really like pink glazed terracotta. Sure, it kind of gives off like the sakura cherry leaves of a tree. There's some fun designs you can do with like the circles of the pink, and like, you know, here's the smaller ones in between the leaves and here's a larger one in between the leaves, but overall it doesn't really do anything even if you try and mix and match them. Like the aesthetic doesn't really change, so there isn't anything too innovating or invigorating about pink glazed terracotta. I'm being too harsh. It is a good block. It is a very pretty block. It's just not as versatile as the other ones, which means in terms of aesthetics, it is on par with everything else. But in terms of being fun and creative with it, it has one use. That came out very negative, but I promise I do think it's a good block. It's just really hard to live up to lime glazed terracotta, guys. Next up is light gray, and it's such a good color combination. The gray and the light gray and this kind of grayish blue, they all just really mix in together without being a real gradient. The slate color appears in other places besides the squares, so the color just really carries through so that it doesn't feel too harsh of a contrast between the two, especially because this is a cooler gray instead of a warmer gray. But there is some hints of warm gray, so it kind of contrasts with the cyan, but the cyan is a mix of blue and green, and it's a warmer cyan because of that green. And therefore the colors, even though they come off as cool, also do give off a warm energy. It's just perfect. It's just a really good block. It's just a solid block. And I really do love the way that these line up with the arches, so you can kind of mix and match to kind of give a technological vibe again. It's like glowing tubes of like random liquid of the future. But yet again, we have the bow tie and the hurricane. I really need to patent these. Next up is cyan terracotta, and this one I think is pretty rough. So number one is just the creeper face. Every time you look at it, your brain goes, pattern recognition. You're like, creeper face. If you try to zone out the creeper face, you can see over here we have like these black dots on the edge of the blocks that line up into these lines. We have this flower fan shape. We have this, which if you, again, ignore the fact that these are creeper faces. There's a fun little like plus sign with little lines on the edge of those, and I really like that shape. If you look over here, these kind of form together in clusters if you mix around them a bit. It is a good block if you just pretend the creeper faces aren't there. But because they are there, your brain just goes, that's the Minecraft guy. I forgot to show off this one. This is like the equivalent of a bow tie texture. As you can see, it expands outwards this way and it kind of curves inward this way. Unfortunately, it's terracotta. This one is actually way more obvious that it's in your face. Like this one, I actually saw myself really focusing on the patterns and ignoring the creeper faces. But if they're facing the proper direction to be a creeper face, oh, they're right there. Oh, there it is. Oh, hey. I love these colors. I love the textures that are behind the creeper faces. If only they just weren't there. It's also not even wholly accurate to what a creeper looks like. I think this texture is amazing. Look at this hurricane texture here. They look like boomerangs. It's such a fun texture. But there just has to be this little punk. Okay, back to the original recording. Next up is a purple glazed terracotta. We have these sword hilts along with a pickaxe head and these like black spots. So of course we have this like coat of arms kind of thing going on with the patterns bursting out behind the swords crossing into each other with the hilts forming a circle. The pickaxes really just blend into each other and force themselves into these fun plus sign shapes. So again, primary, secondary, in between. I am right all of the time. So if you take the blocks and you invert the sword handles every block, then you can have the pickaxes line up in this pattern. And these stripes do give off a really nice carpet design. Next up is blue glazed terracotta. You can see we have the circles around here, and these kind of feed into each other and create these like chain-like structures in between the shapes. And the circles, as you see, are both sides of the shape. What else has those? The squares over here. Corners of the squares are on both corners. You see there's also actually another square right here that forms in between the rings. That actually is an interesting point. Moving on. So then rotating around these chain shapes and this DNA shape, you can have this chains make the hurricane shape again. And I really do like the colors of this. Like, look at that blue. The blues really work for me. I really love this block. It does really look like you could use it for a really fancy rug like this. And that's a really specific scenario. That's another thing that people complain about when it comes to glazed terracotta. They're like, oh man, these are really specific scenarios. Why on earth would I ever use these in a build? I don't build like that. It's like, well, the blocks aren't for you. How about that? Have you considered that? But genuinely, if you try to build in new styles like I did with this Greek garden, you'll find infinite uses for them. You just have to stop building rustic houses, guys. Yeah, I agree also as well. But genuinely, the orange glazed terracotta and the lime glazed terracotta, you can see shapes in them that kind of look like Islamic artwork and things that you'd find in a mosque. The pink, as we've covered up before, is Japanese inspired. The light gray and the magenta and the blue do feel futuristic, but this also can feel Greek, and so can the white glazed terracotta, as you can see that I've used right here. Next up is a brown glazed terracotta, and yes, this does look like a rug you'd buy from the 1970s. I really do love this color combination though. I am a sucker for cyan, as you can maybe tell. The concentric rings of the cyan and the light brown and the cyan and the dark brown just do something for me, and so do these little spiky shapes. This block, however, is another one which is kind of hard to work with. As you can see, you can mix the light brown and the dark brown cyan circles together, and it especially doesn't look that great in large groups. It only works right here. Next up is a green glazed terracotta, and the jungle green is perfect. With the advent of moss blocks coming out in 1.17, they really do wonders when you put them next to green glazed terracotta and melons and glowberries and azalea leaves and so on. It just really does feel like plant life in here, even though this is a block made out of rock. The pattern has these clover shapes and these white circles, which does give merit to the idea that this was supposed to be a block meant for a jungle setting. White paint is used in a lot of representations of people who live in the jungle. The mix of white with these varying shades of jungle green really do make it pop. This is another block which is kind of weird to work with for me. I have no doubt that someone can make something really beautiful with green glazed terracotta. And of course, you can mix and mash these. They don't have to be together with only blocks of their type. You can take the yellow and mix it with the lime, and you can take the orange, you can mix it with the cyan. I'm just here to prove a point to you guys, okay? Because you just leave me alone. Anyway, the green glazed terracotta has the white circles matched with the clovers in terms of positioning on the block, and it just makes a little wave. Next up is red glazed terracotta. I hate this block. Moving up. Okay, my gripe with this block is that yes, there's this fun little spiky shape, there's this fun little square. This doesn't line up with this. So if you then try to make them line up, they have this big pattern over here, but then you just have this in-between block, which just it doesn't match. It's also too red. Like all the other blocks have different colors on that block, but also even here with blocks that are more monotone. There's so many different shades of blue here, but for this, they're all kind of like the same shade of red. There's not enough contrast in this block. And yet again, I forgot to mention that the design of this block is based off of something. This is based off of Japanese depictions of smoke. But oddly enough, I couldn't find any pieces of artwork that look exactly like red terracotta, but we do all have this imagery in our mind of smoke that looks like this in Japanese artwork. Funnily enough, I do remember a blade in Fruit Ninja called the Cloud Kicker, which produces clouds of smoke that look like our stereotypical idea of what smoke is in Japanese art. And there's a lot of interesting things to be said about what we interpret as Japanese artwork rather than like actual traditional Japanese artwork, but like you get it, westernization of media, blah, blah, blah. The shapes of bubbly smoke are there. It is very clearly something inspired by this, but it's not the same, is it? Japanese artwork does a lot of these rounder, spirally shapes. Also, all of these pieces do have inspirations for their designs. It's just that I study art history, so I know that, hey, those shapes look like a certain culture's artwork, and this is what you would make in a normal pottery class, so I wouldn't be able to, like, tell you. And finally is black glazed terracotta. Ain't it a beaut? As you might have noticed, I am also a sucker for the color black, and just with it, this deep red. So we have these squares of circles in here, which kind of have these like handlebars. We have these circles over here with this diamond shape around it, and they don't use this pure black unless it's right here. Otherwise, they're using this more of a gray, warm gray. It looks kind of like gray concrete in terms of shade. Pretty close, isn't it? And ain't it just gorgeous? Oh, it kind of looks like a battle axe right here, you know? That was all the blocks of glazed terracotta kind of put together like a little art gallery. Oh, no, I'm down here. Whatever. My point is, I love these blocks so much, and when they came out, everybody was on their back going like, oh my goodness, these blocks are so ugly. And now they've kind of faded into relative obscurity within the building community, like nobody really uses them. But I believe that they're so great for flooring and walls and ceilings, and you just really need to try and give them a chance. Like, just, they look so sad, they look so lonely out there. Give them a home, give them a place to rest, let them cuddle up and I'm describing them like they're a sad dog. Alright, Benny, say hi to the camera. Instead of having to record the images that I want to show people of like people really using glazed terracotta well, we're just gonna be like, say a bunch of complimentary words like, ooh, awesome, cool, swag, and then we're gonna just put the pictures on top of it. Alright, so in 3, 2, 1. This one's really cool, Benny. This one's so cool, awesome. Okay, you can't just say, oh, we have to do it together. We have to both.
There's nothing on the screen, or we just...
we're just talking. Say some stuff.
Epic. Awesome. Swell.
Okay, that's good enough, I think.
Hooray!
I didn't record the hooray. Alt Z, Alt Z, Alt Z.